sorry. I know we have a small but mighty group today. So I do, of course, want to be mindful of everyone's time so we can begin. This is being recorded, so everybody else that might have wanted to be able to attend but couldn't should be able to listen to this. And of course, always reach out with any questions or anything like that. So I'm very happy to be here for our third and final session. The topic of this session is part of this larger UDL and Accessibility with Anthology Ally series that we've been doing with UDC. Today, it's really focused on the instructor perspective. So we're really looking at the different types of features that Ally provides for instructors. So what we'll be doing is, and I have an agenda slide in just a moment, is we'll really be spending some time on kind of the three core features. But then I've also carved out quite a bit of time to talk about suggestions for instructors and faculty, to talk about best practices, suggestions for where to begin, things I've done in my own classroom that might hopefully just be helpful in terms of really being able to leverage the tool and think about how to bring that into the fold for next semester. So I am going to turn off my actual camera during the session so it doesn't interfere with the bandwidth of anything. And I think so far, I see Joshua, Tarika, and Kayla, of course, the people that are here live. I think you've all attended at least one of the other sessions. So I'm very happy to have you back. Again, my name is Dr. Katie Grinnell. I'm an accessibility strategist here at Anthology. My lovely colleague, Dr. Amy Lamolini, she is the director of accessibility. Her and I put together the presentation today, but she is unfortunately unable to make it. She is actually out on PTO, getting some well-deserved time off with her family. So I'm excited again to be here and really be able to talk about how to use Ally from a more, instructor perspective. So really, the whole purpose of today is to help all of you really be able to understand and describe the purpose of the three different key features that Ally provides for our instructors. So that's the alternative formats, instructor feedback, and the accessibility report. That's really the ultimate takeaway that I'm hoping folks can walk out of here with. But ultimately, if you can pick up on some of the other suggestions and things like that, maybe identify one individual thing to do in terms of how to use Ally more concretely and just more, pervasively in your teaching and course design for the next semester, that would be ideal. So our agenda, it looks short, but we have lots of wonderful things that we'll be covering today. So we'll start with an overview of Ally. Again, I like to kind of start the training from a more fundamental, perspective, just to make sure we're all on the same page, because Ally does different things for specific users. So I think it's helpful to kind of talk that through. And then we'll do a demonstration of Ally for instructors. So today's session will really be kind of a combination of both PowerPoint slides, and then I will move into our demonstration instance and actually show you what the features look like and how they can be used and things like that. So the demonstration part is really where we'll be covering all of those three key features that Ally provides for instructors. And then we'll go back to the PowerPoint slides and we'll do next steps for instructors, which is best practices and suggestions, and then end with support and resources. And I will give everybody a heads up before I make that move and switching over to that different screen. So I always like to start again with the basics, if you will, because I think it's really helpful to kind of level the playing field and just ensure we're all on the same page. So when thinking of Ally, I think it's really helpful, again, to kind of just define it. Let's just discuss it briefly in terms of what does it do. And this is also helpful in terms of thinking about how to talk about it with students. So the way that I typically define or describe Ally is that it is a digital accessibility tool. It is embedded in Blackboard, right, which is your learning management system. And its intention is to help make digital course content more accessible and inclusive. So I think during the first session of this series, I had the same slide, and I'll say the same thing I did then as I will now, is that in many ways, this definition is kind of vague. And that's because, Ally does a lot of different things for different users. But really, the goal is to help make course content, our digital course content, as accessible and inclusive as possible. So that's the what, right? That is, what is Ally and what does it do? The next part is the whom it's for. And there is some crossover in terms of what Ally does for students as for what it does for instructors. So I'll be sure to cover that. So for our students, Ally provides the alternative formats of digital course content. So that means that an instructor uploads their syllabus, for example, and it's a Word document, and a student needs or prefers to have that in a different type of content or format, I should say. So maybe they would like that as an audio version, or they need it in a translated version. Perhaps it's a Braille ready format file that they need it in. That's what Ally is doing. Students have the ability to go in and access any of those alternative formats for either instructor uploaded or created content. So when I say created, that's really speaking to content that you're building directly into Blackboard, and it's not uploaded, like a module or a learning document, things like that. So that's the core feature that Ally provides for students. For instructors, what Ally does is it provides feedback and guidance on how accessible their course content is. So that is a huge component of really the functionality that Ally serves for our instructors, is really giving them feedback, pointing out and identifying certain types of accessibility issues, providing the guidance on how to fix it, the context on why it's important to fix it. But you'll also notice I have a little asterisk at the end of the word instructors. And if we follow that down to the bottom, it's connecting asterisk. It's to say that the instructors also have access to alternative formats. So this is extremely helpful. Number one, of course, for being able to demonstrate to students how to access those, but also for the benefit of yourselves. It's a really fantastic tool, and we can talk through some use cases of why you might want to utilize that moving on, or further on down the road, I should say. And then lastly, for administrators, Ally will provide detailed usage data and insights that really help give a bit of a, I would say, big picture, of how accessible the course content is at the institution, but also with the ability to kind of dive into some of those different data points and looking at, overall institutional scores and things like that. So for today, we're really focusing on instructors, right? But as you know, instructors do also share that common feature with students, which is the alternative formats. So these are the three key features that Ally provides for instructors. So we'll start on the left. And again, it's pretty similar to what I had just talked about a little bit, but I do want to expand a little bit. And this kind of sets us up, and it's a good segue to then dive into the actual demonstration component of the tool. Or excuse me, of the webinar. So if we start over here on the left, we have the alternative formats. So again, this is for students primarily, but instructors also have access to it. So essentially what is happening here is that Ally is automatically generating alternative formats of either instructor uploaded or created content. So again, your Word docs, your PowerPoints, your Ultra documents that you're building, the documents you're building and creating directly in Blackboard, things like that. Ally will then go in, automatically generate alternative formats, and they are there and available for students or instructors whenever they need or want them. There's no limit to how many of them that they can access. Ally does not identify which student is accessing what. We do not tie any type of personal identity information to any user. So that's not something we're tracking whatsoever. The great thing about this, and I think we did a really good job of talking about this and showing this when we met last week, and we talked about how Ally really supports universal design for learning. This is really one of the shining stars that we see this kind of come to fruition, is through the alternative formats, because it's providing that autonomy to instructors and students, particularly students, to be able to access that digital course content when and how they need, and knowing that those needs, their learning environments, their factors that could impact their learning experience for that day can likely change, on a daily basis. So those are the alternative formats. In the middle, we have the instructor feedback feature. So this is really speaking to that guidance and feedback on how accessible an individual content item is. So essentially, instructor feedback will provide an overall accessibility score, and then it will identify any accessibility issues detected in that one individual content item, so a syllabus, for example. And then it provides the information on why it's so important to fix it, what does it really mean to have certain issues, and then how to address them. So that is really kind of one of the biggest, I would say, like interactive features that Ally provides for instructors. And it's really there to help guide them in addressing those issues that were detected and really ultimately hoping to kind of help alter future behavior. And that, once, instructors have kind of gotten the concept of, how and why we need to add alternative text, that's something they build into their course design in the future. And then on the far right, we have what's called the course accessibility report. So this essentially is an amalgamation of all of the content items in your course. And it's providing really a kind of another dynamic report that helps with prioritization and content remediation. And so basically, instructor feedback looks at the accessibility of an individual content item. Course accessibility report is looking at the entire course. And it provides a breakdown of the different types of content you have in your course. And it also includes these different guided remediation approaches to help instructors determine next steps, where should they begin, and help take some of the guesswork out of that. So these are just the 3 key features for instructors at a glance. I'd like to pause here before I move on to the demonstration part and ask if there are any questions on anything that we've just talked about. And I'm just keeping an eye on the chat as well. No questions? Okay. All right. So bear with me for a moment as I kind of switch gears here a little bit and go back. Just want to, okay. All right. If I can just get a thumbs up or you can see my screen, that would make me feel good.
I can see your screen.
Beautiful. Thank you. Sometimes with the different, modalities, I just want to make sure it was working. So I appreciate that. Thank you for confirming. Okay, so I am in one of our demonstration instances, and I'm logged in as an instructor. So this is really what we're going to focus on for the demonstration component, is to spend some time kind of looking at this. Now, I will say, first and foremost, this is a demonstration course. It's a post-impressionism 101. So it's supposed to be really about art history, but there is a weird variety of content items in here that we all kind of use. This is a shared demonstration course. So naturally, James Bond has absolutely nothing to do with post-impressionism. At least I can't figure out what he has to do with post-impressionism. But we'll use some of those documents again, just to kind of show some of those features. So this might look a little bit different naturally than your course. I know that you haven't fully moved over to Ultra, but this is kind of what's to be expected. I will also say that the functionality, the features that are available with Ally, in terms of what they offer, it's the same, right? It's just, it might look a little different within the Ultra version of the course. So here I am signed in as an instructor. And what I want to start spending our time, to begin today is I really wanted to do a little like demonstration of the alternative formats. And so this is important because I'm going to spend some time with this particular item right here. So it's called A Brief History of the James Bond Movies. If we move to the right over here, this is the accessibility indicator. So this is essentially what would bring me to that instructor feedback feature. We will look at that next. But I do want to point this out because this icon, this accessibility indicator will not be visible to students. And that's important to make sure that everybody is aware of. So if I enter into the student preview, it's going to look a little different. Those particular indicators are gone because that is not a student-facing feature. What is there is that alternative format icon, right? So that's available to students and instructors. So again, this is just one distinction I did absolutely want to make, because I think a lot of folks just like to confirm that that is exactly how that works. So again, I'm logged in as an instructor. I see the accessibility indicator. We're going to just put a pause in that for right now. What I wanted to demonstrate is the actual alternative formats. So if I hover over this, it is kind of prompting me to select it, and it tells me download alternative formats. So I know I'm in the right place. So I'm going to select that. And essentially, it will bring me to a list of options that looks similar to this. And I say similar because it's naturally going to look a little different based on the type of file that you've selected. So this is what that view, this is kind of what you can expect the view to be like. You'll have the name of the selected file, right? Or content item right here. And you have the ability to download it, the original, right from here. So a lot of students do this. Sometimes it's just an easier way. Sometimes they're not sure what the actual alternative format icon is, and they kind of think that it is the ability to download the original. But for whatever reason, that is there for students and, of course, instructors. But really, the meat, if you will, of this particular feature are all of these different really awesome alternative formats that are available to students and, of course, our instructors. So there are tagged PDFs, HTML files, and I'll talk about each of these, EPUB, electronic braille, audio, Beeline Reader, the Microsoft Immersive Reader, and the translated version. And essentially how it works is you decide which of these you would like. Let's say you want HTML, you select that, and then you hit download when you're ready to move forward with that particular alternative format. A couple of things I did want to point out is that there is another alternative format option that we do have, and that is for what's called an OCR PDF. So an OCR PDF is a type of PDF that really is for scanned PDFs. So, let's say you have a book that you want your students to read, but maybe they only need to read like one chapter. You would scan essentially one chapter of it, or you share a scanned image that you've used before in your courses. The problem with that is that it's not accessible to assistive technology, right? So essentially it's missing metadata. It's really an image, like a blank image almost, because there is no alt text, there's no metadata, semantic structure, all those things that would need to be embedded in code in order for any student using any type of assistive technology to pick that up. So that's why it's so important. So an OCR PDF, it's technically, OCR stands for optical character recognition. It converts it. It does this kind of technical conversion process and makes it into something that is searchable and accessible through assistive technology. So that type of PDF will only pop up as an option if the original selected file is a scanned PDF itself. So it's not that there's anything wrong with this, the way that this is kind of presenting itself. It's just that it's dependent on the type of, it needs to be a scanned PDF as that original file in order for that to be an option. So that is one of the options that we offer. PDFs are tricky when it comes to accessibility. So the more we can offer in terms of support for that, the absolute better. One of the really more popular, I would say, alternative formats, students really gravitate towards the tagged PDF. And we're not, I don't know 100% if it's for students that do need that to access that with assistive technology, but also a tagged PDF oftentimes is just really a cleaner version of a PDF. And sometimes it looks a lot better when students are opening it up on a mobile device. But essentially, it looks the same, like if we look at it visually. So if I select download, and then depending on the size of the actual item, it might take a little bit of time, but it looks the same, right? So I'm looking at this and I can't essentially tell that anything has been, changed or anything, or updated, I should say. So a tagged PDF basically is assigning these different like identification labels to different parts of the document. And the purpose of that is so that, again, it's that semantic structure. You have a title, you have paragraph 1, you have heading 2, table, image, things like that. And that will get picked up and be read aloud if a student is using assistive technology, like anything with text to speech. Because if they're not able to see what the structure is, they might not be able to, they can't necessarily know, well, okay, this is centered, right? A brief history of the James Bond movies. I'm assuming this is the title, but if it wasn't structured in a way that will be picked up from assistive technology, they really don't know that. So it looks the same visually. It's really embedded in the code is essentially, you know, what is happening in that offering. So that's one of the options. I won't be able to show all of them just for sake of time, but a couple others I did want to point out. The semantic HTML is another really popular alternative format. So all I did is select that specific format. I'll hit download. So this is another important component when it comes to that structure, right? That you want to make sure that you have the semantic structure. So again, what happens here is it's kind of like tags that are being applied to different parts of the text of the document. And it's structured as a web page file, right? So it's really, the look of it is pretty similar. Everything's kind of centered on the left. But again, if you're using assistive technology, it's going to be read out and provide that structure that is so important. One of the really good things about this is that this can be downloaded and then accessed later. So if a student is like somewhere where their internet connectivity isn't that strong, or they just want to be able to access it at a later time, they can. You can also share, or excuse me, not share, split your screen if you're using HTML. So I think it depends. There's a couple different ways, but if you're a Windows user like myself, I would simply hit the Windows key on my keyboard and then like the right or left arrow. So essentially what I could do is if I needed to kind of mimic that like dual monitor experience, I could have my document right here. And then if I needed to do to write something about it and I had a Word document pulled up, pull that up in one of these screens and kind of take notes or things like that. So I love that. I think that's a nice little bonus that the type of format offers. I will show, I'm only going to show a couple more. The EPUB, excuse me, this is a digital publishing file that you access with an e-reader program. So you can, access that with like an ebook or e-reader program. Kindle is very, is kind of one of the first that comes to mind. There's a lot of other programs, ebook and e-reader programs that are out there. I use Thorium. So essentially what it does is it allows for more customization of the reading, I would say, output, if that makes sense. So I'm going to select EPUB and I'll hit download. And again, it's going to look a little different based on the type of e-reader program you're using. Excuse me. I'm just going to type in the name Thorium. This is the tool that I use. It is free. So essentially, there's all these different options for how you want to use it. You can essentially, bookmark this. You can do text to speech, which is fantastic. So I could have this read aloud to me. I can search, into the actual publication. I can bookmark it. I can annotate. I am able to navigate a little more specifically through the different parts. This is helpful if you bookmark it, and that makes it easier to kind of jump from one spot to another. So there's lots of great accessibility features right there, but then also this is the customization part that I love. So everybody has really a different preference and or need, perhaps a combination of both in terms of how they want to engage with their content. So I could select my background display, my theme, if you will, as night. And okay, so that's much darker. Perhaps I want the layout to be scrollable instead of paginated. Let's say I want the font size to be a lot bigger. Perhaps I want to change the font to something different. So I put modern spacing. I can even change the spacing between lettering and margin, word spacing, paragraph. It's just really interesting to be able to kind of change this to a way, or customize this, I should say, in a way that suits the learner's needs. And it doesn't do anything to the original file, right? This is just a different way of engaging with it. So this is a wonderful tool. I love using it. I use it quite a bit myself. All right. The electronic Braille. So essentially what Ally will do is it provides what's called a Braille ready format file. So this is an actual Braille file. It can be used exclusively with either an electronic Braille display, or there are software programs that are for Braille readers essentially. So this isn't something that I can actually demonstrate. I myself do not use this, but this is a wonderful option, particularly if we're thinking about how it's fantastic for students to have that instantaneous access to their content in Braille. So to have something embossed in Braille, like printed in Braille and then provided to the students, sometimes that can take a really long time. It can be on the costly side of things. So this is just an additional route to make it a little more instantaneous. The audio version, essentially, it's an MP3 of the original file. It will then, once you download it, you open it up and it will be opened up on whatever the device you're using, whatever kind of organic media player you have installed. The Beeline reader is really cool. So I'm going to select download. So this is a tool that takes color gradients and applies them to different parts of the text. So if you can kind of follow along with me right here, currently we are in the bright family of color gradients that are offered. I can select any of these. This is probably the most drastic, night, but essentially it takes the colors and it applies it to different parts of the document, and it's intended to kind of guide your eye a little more quickly without putting as much strain on your eye. And, essentially it comes in an HTML version. You can change which of these particular color gradients you'd like to see applied. This is really a really interesting tool because it was created by a lawyer to help with speed reading. But we have found that it's really been extremely beneficial for our students and our instructors that either they have dyslexia, perhaps they have ADHD, chronic migraine, even if you don't have any of those specific types of impairments, but you are in front of the computer all day, or you plan on it, right? You can use this to help kind of take out some of the additional strain that it puts on your eye. So this is another really kind of fantastic tool. All right, so the next two that we have Immersive Reader. So this is Microsoft Immersive Reader. This is, already embedded within Ally. We partner with Microsoft on this. So this is similar in some ways to the e-reader, where you can kind of customize things, see like the text and the spacing and the background themes. But what sets this apart is that it's really a learning and reading comprehension tool. So here you can turn syllables on, and then you can highlight to help identify the different parts of speech in the document itself. So if you want all nouns in blue, you can have that turned on, all adjectives in this yellow mustard color. And then those will highlight throughout the entire document. And then let's just say you're not really remembering which of the specific colors that you can, or that you have chosen to apply to different parts of speech. You can actually put show labels. So it will put the first letter, or in this case for adjective, just the first three letters, so that it's a reminder to the reader that when they're going through that, we're not using color alone to convey meaning, and you're able to see specifically what type of speech that is. So these are the different versions of alternative formats we offer. The last one that we have is the translated version. Currently, we have over 70 different languages. So the one I always like to show is what it would look like in Gaelic Irish. It's on my bucket list to learn how to speak. Or I think it's Irish Gaelic is how it would be said. But then I would likely need to move to the west coast of Ireland because that's probably the only place where it's really spoken. So that might not happen, but every time I do this, it gets me one step closer to thinking this might be a thing for me. But you'll see that the output is really just in HTML, and this is how it's being read back, right? So again, it's all of the different languages. This is a machine-generated translation, so this might not come out as 100% perfect if you had a professional translator, but again, it's a really kind of wonderful, helpful tool to have. So those are the alternative formats. I'm going to just pause for a moment and see if there are any questions on anything that I just shared. Yeah, okay. And I usually spend a little more time talking about these, particularly when I have the ability to speak with faculty, because you are on the front lines with your students, right? And you have the ability to kind of demonstrate some of these use cases, talk about, how you can use them, how students can use them. It's just I think, a really beneficial tool, and it's available for every single student, right? I think that's another thing that we should always kind of emphasize, is that there is no official accommodation that needs to be had. Students don't need to ask for permission. Instructors will never know which students downloaded what, nor would anybody at Anthology know that, right? We're not tracking any of that data. It's really for autonomy and to create more accessible and inclusive learning experiences for our students. All right, well, if it works with everybody, I'm going to move on now to the instructor feedback. So again, the alternative formats will show up both for students and instructors. What we want to focus on now is the instructor feedback. So what I'm looking for is this looks like a colored gas gauge. And this is what we call the accessibility indicator. And you'll see that kind of scattered in around with some of these other pieces of content that we have in this demo course. But essentially, selecting this is what is going to bring you to that instructor feedback. And instructor feedback is what's going to help identify all of the different accessibility issues found in that item, and then provide guidance on how to fix it. So I'm hovering over that accessibility indicator, and that text box reads that the accessibility score only for this particular item, right? It's not for anything else, is a medium, and I should select to improve. So I do that, and it will bring me to this. So I want to walk through what this looks like and how to use this, and then we can kind of go through an example together of fixing it based on the guidance. So essentially what we have over here in the left is we have the actual in-browser preview of the document itself, right? So all it is that Word document. And what's really cool, and I'll talk about what's being highlighted right here in just a minute. But again, this is really helpful, especially if you have a document with a lot of images or things like that. It's just so helpful to have a preview so you can kind of identify where on your document you need to address these issues. So you'll have that in-browser preview for most of the documents that you can upload. If we move over here to the right, you'll have the title of the actual file or itself, right? And then you have its score. So from 0 to 100, what is the score that is being assigned to this particular item? So you have a 52%. So you have red, which is for, that's low, inaccessible, essentially. Orange is in the medium range, and with it, there are certain percentage, I would say, ranges that are associated with it. Light green, so if this was light green, that would be considered good, and then a darker green is considered perfect, according to C.A.L. So for here, we're at a 52%, kind of right in the middle of things in terms of accessibility. Now, if this particular content item had more than one issue that was found in this document, it essentially would say in very teeny tiny text, it would say all issues, kind of right where my cursor is. It would say all issues, and there'd be an I with a circle around it. So what this is telling me is there's only one issue that was found in this particular item. So here, that issue is being highlighted right here. So it says that this document contains images without a description. What that means is, let's actually click here to learn. So Ally will provide the what, the why, and the how. So if I select what this means, it's going to define this for me in accessible language. So it explains that an image description, sometimes referred to as alt text, is a textual alternative for an image. It makes it easier to connect the image to its context, and then allows students with visual impairments to perceive the page. So again, the alt text is what is going to be picked up by assistive technology or text-to-speech functionality, right? And without it, that particular learner really would not have any access to the image. They wouldn't know what's happening in it. They wouldn't have the important information that it is conveying, things like that. So if I hit the arrow in the bottom right-hand corner, then I'm brought to the why. So the previous slide was, or page was really showing us the what's. This is then giving us more information on why. So this is like that really good context. So it's helpful when connection is poor. It facilitates searching. It provides better context. And it usually will identify one particular group of students that it's essential for, right? So it is essential for students with visual impairments. So I feel good about that. At least I have the what and the why. I have an idea of what this means. Now I need to learn how to do this. So this will depend, right? And Ally will kind of prompt you to essentially choose the software you will be opening up the document in to address the issues. So with the uploaded files and using instructor feedback, when you're making the actual changes and you're fixing that content, you're doing it directly in the program that you originally made it in. Okay, so in this instance, we're going to be using Microsoft Word. Okay, for me, I used Microsoft Office 365. So I'm going to open that right there. And it's going to kind of guide me on all of the different, things that I need to do. There are screenshots. There's more information. It's really kind of a step-by-step, list of instructions that's really helpful. So let's say I feel good about all of that. Okay. Now I'm going to get the actual document itself, which I've already downloaded. Okay. What I remember is that only one issue was found, and that issue was that missing alt text, right? So I need to add a description to that one image that I have. So it's going to depend on the type of software you're using. One of the quickest ways to do this is just simply right click on the image itself, go all the way down here. The third from the bottom says view alt text. I'll select that. And then here is where I would go in and add my alt text. Now, let's say that this image was not important, as in it wasn't offering any new information. If somebody didn't have access to it, like if a learner didn't have access to it, they wouldn't be missing out on on important information. If that was the case, they could simply select mark as decorative. And that way it kind of bypasses it, right? If it is important, you can generate alt text using AI, collage of a person in a suit. Let's just say for the sake of this particular demonstration that that's good enough. I'll save that. And then I'm going to go back to Ally. And now what I need to do, since I've addressed it in the actual document, I'm going to browse. Let's see. I'm going to upload the new and improved version. And what I want is to see that overall score increase. Now I fixed it. It is now at 100. So this is perfect. This is exactly what I wanted. So I close this out. That will now reflect itself. See, this is in that dark green. It's perfect. So I have addressed that. The other type of content item you might be doing this for would be your WYSIWYG content, right? So if you're building something directly into your course. So I do have an example of that because that experience is a little bit different. So I've basically taken this particular Word document and just, put it into the format of an Ultra document. So if I select that and I want to see how accessible this is, to be able to do that, I need to go into the editing box, right? I have to go to editing mode. And essentially, instead of it being kind of like it was to the right of the file name, the accessibility indicator is right here. Okay. So I'm going to select that, and it's going to be kind of similar in look and feel. So this is really missing a description, right? So sometimes what happens is you'll have the name of the file will inadvertently get saved to the alt text field spot, and then that's obviously not accurate, right? So Ally will determine you can't have that. That doesn't tell the learner anything. So I'm not going to use that. But the way that this would be, it would work exactly as we were just looking at it with a Word document, right? So what is it? Why is it important? And then how do I do this? So it's different here because I did this directly in Blackboard. So I don't have to go separately and get a downloaded file and then upload that new and improved version. I'm doing it all in the interface itself. So Ally also has the AI alt text assistant. So I'll have it auto generate the description for me. It's basically the same as what we got from using Microsoft. Let's say this is good enough. I'll hit save. And then it's going to ultimately change it, right? So now it's at a 100% and I've addressed that. So those are the two ways that you can use that instructor feedback feature. And again, to enter into that, you have to go for that WYSIWYG content, you have to go into editing mode. So now I'm comfortable with this. I'm really happy. I'm going to X out of that. And I've really just gone ahead in a matter of minutes and addressed those two issues. And I feel a lot better about it. I know they've been addressed. And the more you do those individual fixes, the more that feeds into that larger course accessibility report. So under books and tools, I'm going to select view course and institution tools. Again, the way this looks might be a little different for you. I believe in Blackboard Original, the menu is on the left side of things, but you're looking for that, accessibility report. And this, if Ally is enabled in your course, this will be available. So this is that course accessibility report, and this is giving me an idea of overall how accessible is my course. So it should look kind of similar. You should see like, okay, I see the accessibility indicator. This looks familiar. At least I know overall my course has a 67% accessibility score. Okay, so it's in the green, right? But there's of course room for improvement. Now, if I move down here, I'll have a bit of a content breakdown, which is really cool. So it's going to tell me how many images, standalone images I have in my course, how many Word documents, PDFs, etc. And this is kind of a correlating pie chart that you can use. You can look at a list of every single piece of content that you have in your course, and you can do that one of two ways. You can either select content or view. It will bring you to the same end result. So this is a list of every single content item you have. It will give you the name. It will identify how many issues were in this specific content item, and then it will give you your score, right? So essentially, this looks exactly like it would for that instructor feedback, because you can actually access instructor feedback from here. So let's say you were just really pumped up and ready to begin approaching your accessibility issues, and you're going to start with this one. Essentially, you can just hover over that accessibility indicator, and it brings you right there. Okay. So this is actually a great example. This is a scanned PDF, right? And we'll talk through kind of the issues with that. But the whole intention is for you to see that you can access that directly from this particular report. And that's intentional, right? We're not trying to have you have to have 8,000 different, windows open. We want to kind of keep up that workflow. So as I mentioned towards the beginning of the session, there are 3 different guided remediation approaches. So really what that means is Ally will compile a list of content items that meet specific types of criteria. And it's doing that on purpose to help guide you in which way should you begin approaching, fixing your content. So the first option is this one in the top right-hand corner. So we have an arrow in a black circle. Over to the right, it says that content with the easiest issues to fix. It tells me that there's 25 of these content items that have this issue. And if I select start, essentially what Ally is doing is just compiling a list of all of the items that have that issue. And then you can approach it directly from here and begin adding that alt text if this is something insufficient color contrast, if you're ready to kind of do that. So when we say easy, we mean this is a good spot for beginners, because addressing some of the easier issues like missing alternative text or insufficient color contrast, it really doesn't take a lot of technical savviness or too much, pre-existing knowledge on how to do this. And it might not be as time consuming. So if you're a novice, if you only have 10 minutes, but you really want to do something in 10 minutes, this is a great place to begin. And you can essentially begin knocking them out that way. And as you address them, then that issue will be removed and it would go down to 24 and then 23, etc. And then you'd start to see that score go up. And the other 2 approaches are to fix the lowest scoring content. So anything that's essentially in the red, or again, you could just have, some really accessible content and you might not even have anything in the red, whatever is technically in that lowest scoring range. And similar to that first approach, you select start and it brings you, hopefully, drum roll, please. It will bring you to a list of all of the items that have, that have those low scoring, items. So this is essentially sometimes the more complicated things. You might need a little more time for this. It really just depends. And then the final option is kind of everything else, but it gives you the ability to filter the view. So let's say out of, all of the things that aren't included here, you want to look at all of the remaining issues, right? So it's not exactly grouping it just by individual content items, it's by issues. So you can look at it by order of severity. So from minor to, most severe, right? Perhaps you want to start with most severe. You can focus in on an individual issue. This is really great if, let's say, you're really comfortable with adding alternative text. So for images without a description, then you start with what you know, right? And you go from there and you address those. And it's, again, same thing. It's compiled into a list that meet that specific criteria. Or what you could do is look at the issue that has impacted the highest number of content. I love this option because I think, again, it's really helpful and it feels good to see those numbers go down. So again, addressing things like in this instance, the document does not have the correct language set, how to address that, contrast issues, etc. So you'll see it's ordered, by highest to lowest, or you can switch that up. So this is really helpful, again, in getting kind of that overall big picture of, where your content stands when it comes to Ally and all of the different accessibility scores that we have and all of the guidance that are offered. I think really what is the most helpful is really just thinking about your own individual. I'm going to go back to our slide deck if that's okay. But I think a lot of it is based on knowing your own, I would say, knowledge, your skill set when it comes to accessibility, right? So I'm going to pause for just a moment and stop before I continue to see if there's any questions on any of those additional features that I just demonstrated. Okay, all right. So having said that, I think it's important to think about, all right, we did a brief overview and demo of these individual features. What do we do now? So this is one of my favorites. I think one of my favorite movies, What About Bob? So we're looking at an image here taken from the movie. This was an 80s movie. Essentially what we have here is an image of Dr. Leo Marvin, and he plays a psychologist in the movie. It's played by Richard Dreyfuss. He's holding up his book that he wrote. It's called Baby Steps. And then we see the back of his patient, Bob's head, played by Bill Murray. And in the movie, Bob has extremely severe obsessive compulsive disorder and anxiety. And he is looking for help. He's really needing a lot of help. And he seeks out Dr. Marvin, who is kind of known for this approach, this idea of baby steps. And yes, it's a movie and it's not it's not about real life, but I just love the principle because I think it's, applicable in almost any instance, especially when we're feeling overwhelmed and we don't know where to begin. I always say, start with those baby steps. And each time you make any type of progress, each time you address something in your course and make it more accessible, that is progress. And that is what we will always want over perfection. And I say this because I don't want folks to get overwhelmed and think everything in there needs to be perfect in order to make it accessible. Again, I would rather you strive for making as many changes and fixes as possible, right, than to really push for perfection, because the way that we look at this, not something you just get to the one time and then you're done. So I wanted to make sure that we were able to kind of do a little bit of, thinking about how helpful this might be from this kind of perspective. And then in terms of where to start, this is always kind of the big question. I get this quite a bit. And my first piece of advice would be to do a personal assessment, super informal, of your current understanding of how to fix content. So how to remediate content and digital accessibility. So this is informal. You don't have to share this with anybody, right? You're just kind of having an open and honest conversation with yourself. You don't have to submit any forms. But I would ask and suggest that you really are realistic with yourself. And there's nothing wrong with not having a strong understanding of a lot of these different issues. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's what Ally is here for. But knowing where you are is going to be helpful in knowing kind of where to kind of begin. right? And in this informal assessment, ask yourself some of the following questions. Are there specific areas of digital accessibility you really don't understand? Are you a novice? Do you need a lot of support? Are you limited in time, or are you worried about how this will impact your courses? And again, there's no right or wrong answers here. It's just we want to have an idea of a realistic idea of where to kind of start. So from there, use that that personal assessment to then determine your next steps. And that's really why I would, encourage everybody to be as honest with themselves as possible. Then you can essentially use your knowledge, or increase your knowledge of digital accessibility or Ally by way of our help site, right? So I'll put that in the chat here as well. So it's help.blackboard.com/Ally. So that's one way that you can do it. And within there, you can get really specific and you can identify those explicit areas of concern. Like say you really don't really understand about alternative text, or you don't understand why PDFs are so complicated, or why do we have to add headings to documents? Our help site has all of this, right? All of the context and of course the guidance. So maybe that's just start with one of those areas and increase that knowledge. Or perhaps you want to strive to reach a certain overall accessibility score for all of your courses or one course. Maybe you just want to get that specific, light green level, or maybe you want to get a specific number like 80%. To do that, maybe you could use one of those 3 guided remediation approaches in your course accessibility report that we just looked at that will help you. You could also spend time exploring the 3 key Ally features for instructors. So if you need to rewatch this video, if you want to, again, go to our help site where we have a breakdown of all of the different features and how they work. If you have a colleague that you could ask for help, of course, C.A.L is a wonderful resource. And, of course, the Center for the Advancement of Learning. I know they've done a lot of work to really provide support and resources for instructors on this important topic. And then kind of thinking ahead to next semester, which I'm not sure if your semester has officially ended. It might be finals week, or perhaps grades are just about due. So I'm sure you might not want to think about next semester, but these are just a couple suggestions of what you could do as you are, after you've had some downtime, but as you are kind of gearing up for the next semester. Really essentially planning accordingly when you're preparing your courses for the next semester. And that could be factoring in additional time for addressing those accessibility issues that were identified in instructor feedback. Maybe you just know you'll need a little extra time. Again, maybe you set that goal. Perhaps it's, an overall accessibility score for each individual class. Keep track of your progress, celebrate those wins because they're amazing. Anytime you do anything, this helps students so much. Use that content breakdown in the course accessibility report to maybe think, maybe I have a lot of PDFs. Maybe I'll try to do more Word documents and maybe kind of rearrange the way that I have my content structured. Use the Ally support site to increase those content remediation skills. And the last component is also going to be helpful, again, as you look to the next semester. So what I have on this screen, that will show up on the screen in just a moment, are things that I highly recommend. And I've done all of them in my own teaching, and they've been very beneficial. Sorry about that. Went too fast. So to be able to increase awareness and the usage of Ally's alternative formats. So again, this is that one feature that is primarily for students, also available for instructors. But as instructors, you have the ability to communicate with your students that they even exist, how to use them, some use cases, and things like that. So how to really increase that awareness and usage for students and further that communication effort. These are a couple things that, that you might want to consider doing. Including information in your syllabus. So in my syllabi, I have both, because the school that I teach at right now has Ally, which is wonderful. So I have a little section on the availability of the alternative formats. And I'm happy to send over an example if that's something that would be beneficial. So I talk a little bit about it, that it's available for everybody. I also have a separate accessibility statement. So that's really just more, big picture. how do I approach accessibility in the course? And then there's that separate kind of little section on the alternative formats. You could also announce it in your class and of course within Blackboard. So again, utilize that announcements feature if you are, even if you are face-to-face, it could be in addition, it could be an and also, where you're really just trying to expose students to this. Provide additional guidance on Blackboard. So what I do is I have a separate folder. It's like a learning module that contains all sorts of resources and things like that for my students so they can access the Disability Services Office. I do have a link in there for them on bringing them to the help sites that we have for students for alternative formats. So I think I have something in there for tutoring and academic services. So really, it's just more exposure. They're in their course and they're able to see that. You could also give a demonstration of how to access the alternative formats during class, or if you are, mostly face-to-face, or excuse me, mostly asynchronous and online, you could record that. That's something that I do. I teach mostly online right now, so I always record one and then share that in my course for students to access at any time. My only suggestion would be before you do that, right, before you give a demonstration or record one, that you make sure that you enter into that student preview mode so that students do not see those accessibility indicators. So nothing bad will happen if they do. I think it's just helpful. That's intended to be an instructor feature. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, just make sure you just go into that student preview mode before you are going to provide the demonstration or record one. So I realize we are at time. So what I'm happy to do is after this, I will send the wonderful Kayla an email with a lot of different resources and support that we have that are always there and available, right? So we have an ally user group. Anybody can join this. We have an online discussion forum. There's meetings every other month. It's a beautiful community and people are extremely welcoming and inclusive. So the more, the merrier. We have our support site, of course, which I've already shared the link to that. We have office hours for the actual product for Ally. So every other month, our product team leads these office hours. You can submit questions ahead of time and they will answer them in real time. We'll talk about new and upcoming things that are, happening with Ally and any features and things like that. Again, anybody can join. They're also recorded. So if you happen to be unavailable to attend that day, we will have access to the recordings. We also have the anthology community. So this is kind of like a collaborative platform of global anthology users. There's discussion forums. We have one on accessibility, user groups. We have a really lively blog, lots of wonderful things about accessibility and Ally. And lastly, the member idea exchange. So if you have an idea, a feature request, something you think would really be helpful when in Ally, this is where you could provide that. So this is kind of like a virtual suggestion box. So I will, again, as I promised, I will make sure I provide a list of all of these resources and kind of a brief description of what they are and how you can access them. And make sure I get those over to Kayla so that you have those as kind of ongoing resources, just so that they're there and you know that you're not doing this alone. And that, of course, we know that accessibility is a journey. And I know that sounds like a country song, but it is in fact the case. And it's a collective, kind of offering that we're all committed to. So I'll just I stopped sharing and I'll turn my video on. And I'm going to go into the chat, but if anybody has any questions or comments, I'm happy to stay on. I know we're at time, so I want to be mindful of that, but I'm happy to answer anything now, and I'll keep an eye on the chat as well.
Katie, thank you so much for
Of course.
this webinar and just like facilitating the whole series, you and Amy. I really appreciate it. And I know
We're
the
happy to do it.